Okay. Bonjour, good evening. Thank you and welcome everyone for joining us to Taking Care, a community-led discussion on cultural accessibility in the arts. This program is produced by the Museum of Vancouver and coordinated by my excellent colleague and program manager, Elisa C. de Jesus. My name is Viviane Gosselin. My pronouns are she and her. I'm the Director of Collections and Exhibitions and Curator of Contemporary Culture at the Museum of Vancouver. And it is really a pleasure and an honor to represent MOV at this event. My visual description: I'm a white woman of French ancestry. I'm in my 50s. I have brown hair and some gray hair, curly hair in a ponytail. I have brown eyes. I'm wearing glasses with a thick rim. And I'm wearing a gray woolen shirt over a black t-shirt. And behind me is a strange looking ceiling with slanted walls because I'm in the attic of our house. Today, I feel really grateful to the moderator and panelists for the work they did in helping us plan this session and for this opportunity to learn from them with my colleagues in the cultural sector. The Museum of Vancouver is located on the unceded territories of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, and the site of the ancestral village of Sgsmåk. I'm not at the museum this evening, I'm at home, so I speak from the territories of the Stalo, Semiamo, Waysay-Notch, and Kwantlen nations, colonially known as Langley. If you do not yet know and would like to find out whose traditional territories you're on, we would like to direct you to this great resource called nativeland.ca. So we'll post it on the chat. So how did the idea of this presentation come about? Carmen Papali and I have been in conversation for many years about the need for cultural organization like MOV to rethink their approach for making their space more meaningful to communities with diverse needs. And Carmen, over the years, have been like really patient and inviting us to engage with a definition of accessibility that is moving beyond the concept of universal accessibility and towards a framework that embraces disability representation, expressions, and cultures across museum work and across the cultural sector. So we've been talking about applying this expensive definition of accessibility by collaborating on specific museum projects as a way for the museum staff and partners to work with new sets of parameters and ask ourselves, like, what does really a culturally accessible space looks like at MOV? And what does the process of creating an accessible exhibition look like? How do we dismantle like barriers that my colleagues and I at times don't even know are there? So our first collaborative exhibition is scheduled to open in 2024 or 2025, and will stage the past, present, and future of disability activism in Vancouver through an intersectional lens. And so this webinar today is very much part of this process of broadening our understanding and our practice of accessibility at MOV. It made sense to start the conversation by inviting artists, activists from the disability community willing to share their experience working with, in, and around cultural organization. It also made sense to make this a collective learning opportunity by inviting professionals from the cultural sector to take part in this exchange of knowledge as a way to nurture a community of practice and learn from each other's journey into practicing cultural accessibility. So before I hand it to our moderator, I have a few housekeeping items. There is a resource list for participants, an excellent resource list provided by the panelists that you'll find in the chat. And my second point is, like, we're super fortunate to have Divya Nanray as our accessibility assistant, who's here to help mediate between attendees and our Zoom state manager, Amanda Peters. If at any time you require assistance with access, please direct message Divya on the chat. And I'll go over key features before we begin so we can engage with this session through the Zoom platform. So closed captions are available to you by clicking on the CC or transcript button with your Zoom window. If you have questions for the panelists, please ask the questions using the Q&A window at the bottom of your screen. The Q&A feature is the best way for our team to keep track of incoming questions. And thanks to our ASL interpreter, Liz and Jillian, who are working with us today. Attendees might know that our presenters may be slowing their speech a little more than usual at times in order to assist the interpreter and accommodate the Waututh transcript. That's also a subtle reminder to our presenters to consider their speech, their speed of speech, like, and a reminder to myself. Please know that this session will be recorded and shared afterwards on MOV YouTube channel. A link to this, as well as a proofread transcript, will be emailed to attendees in a few weeks. And thank you for taking the time to join with us for this session. So I'll now pass the mic to my friend and colleague, Carmen Papalia, who will introduce himself, our panelists, and speak more to the framing of this evening's conversation. Just want to mention that after the four short presentation by Siobhan, Raven, Kay, and Q, there will be a break followed by a Q&A from the audience. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Vivian. Is my audio coming through all right?
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for being here. It's Carmen speaking. I use he, him pronouns. Before we start with an access check, I'd like to just speak about the accessibility of this space. I'd also like to thank a few people. First, the access workers that are present and everybody who is providing support on the production side of things. It's your presence that makes everybody's attendance possible, so thank you. I also want to thank everybody in the audience, and everybody in your lives who has supported you in formal and informal ways to be here today. It's this labor of love that makes these kinds of gatherings possible. So thank you. And of course, also a huge thank you to Elisa and Vivian. It's always a pleasure working with you all. And I know we have some exciting plans in the works too for the future. In terms of accessibility, I think of accessibility as an ongoing practice that is guided by community needs. This means we are all helping to maintain the accessibility of this space. In the spirit of collective access, I'd like to invite everybody here to help us hold a safe and supportive space for everyone who is present, including our attendees, our access workers, and of course our special guests, our presenters. This is also I'd like to name this space as a gentle, disability-informed space. Naming a space as gentle is something that I learned from my friend Rebel Fayola Rose, who is the founder of the Portland-based organization Disability Justice Dreaming. Rebel needs a gentle space, and a lot of us do too. So I also invite you to help us hold a gentle space for each other and yourselves. This is also a disability-informed space. It is this way because we are present, we are here, and we are centered. This means that you can take the comfort that you need in the ways that you need. This is a space where you can show up sick or in a flare-up or on meds. It's a non-medical space where you can be with pain or discomfort or distract yourself from it. There are no expectations on you except for the understanding that you will honor our community agreements around accessibility and how we're holding this space today. I think that's all my notes on accessibility. I'd like to start with an access check, and before that, I'd like to just say that Siobhan, Raven, and Kay are all on the advisory committee of a organization that me and local artist and organizer Mia Amir started in 2021 called the Open Access Foundation for Arts and Culture. Q has also supported our work since we started up. So Q, you're part of the Open Access Foundation Extended Universe. So the Open Access Foundation is a pandemic era cultural organization that is guided by the principles of disability justice. Our mission is to set a new cultural standard for accessibility by nurturing creative and justice-oriented accessibility practices. Before all our meetings, we have an access check like we are just about to do. So in our usual fashion, I'll just invite whoever would like to go first to introduce themselves by way of a brief access check. And I'm also happy to go if folks want me to go first.
This is Kay. Take it away, Carmen. Check.
Thank you, Kay. Carmen speaking. I'm calling in from the stolen land of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Stolo people. I was born here. My grandparents emigrated here. We are uninvited guests on this land and grateful to be here. I'm on land that is part of what is colonially known as East Vancouver. I'm in the Hastings Sunrise neighborhood. I'm at my desk in my bedroom. I am a 40-year-old artist with olive skin and black hair. I have a beard. Today I am wearing a gray button shirt with long sleeves, black jeans, and a green wool cap. It's a fisherman style cap. And I also have 2 sets of headphones that I'm using. I'm a screen reader user, so I am listening to software on 2 devices right now. I have these black over-the-ear headphones on, then underneath I have this like earbud in my right ear. Something that might not be as visible is the additional pain that I'm carrying today in my spine and in my joints. I had a flare-up recently. I'm having a high pain day, so I'm doing what I need to do to stay comfortable. I had some recent travel, and due to like the recent changes in weather, it kind of led to a pain flare. So sometimes with pain, it affects my processing and my information recall. So I'm just going to be gentle with myself today, and I'm going to move in the ways that I need to find comfort. And I think that's it in terms of accessibility. I have my heating pad set up over there and some water here, so I think I'll be good. And that's me, check.
Raven here. I'm gonna now push Kay towards the front and center.
This is Kay. I deserve that. My name is Kay. And I just signed my name sign, which is the ASL for pickles. Take your hand into a V on your dominant hand, and then bring your thumb to the inside of your middle finger at the closest knuckle to your palm. Poke the side of your cheek near your mouth as if you had a dimple with the tip of your middle finger, and then twist it twice while making a bit of a sour face. I am a white, middle-aged, trans, non-binary human with gray hair shaved at the sides, with the rest of it barely contained in a messy ponytail. I have a round face, double pierced at the nose and lip, a downy mustache, and I'm wearing large frame glasses. My tongue piercing occasionally clicks when I speak. I have a large frame and read as femme in gender-neutral clothing. Today, this means a gray shirt with a burrito embroidered on one breast and paint-stained shorts. I am standing in my studio with a black backdrop behind me. To my left is a suspended microphone, and I am wearing a black headset. My access needs are met by the captions and interpreters. I ask that folks pause for a breath after each speaker to allow for interpreters to catch up and to allow for any reactions, especially laughter. I wish to acknowledge that the dictionary, that otter.ai or the auto-generated caption machine uses is colonial, and that names may be misrepresented in the auto-generated captions. I've also written out my speaking notes today to help reduce my stutter and welcome anyone to contact the organizer for these files if it's easier to follow along. Check.
Raven here, I'm going to continue to bully and push CO to the front if they're not already doing it.
It was good timing. CEO speaking. I had unmuted in preparation for the push. I'm CO or Siobhan. I use both. I use CO, they, and she as pronouns. I am a non-binary person that presents as Black with a mixed cultural heritage. I live with both visible and invisible disability. I am currently sitting in a calm room in my new home, which is actually piled high with boxes and is a source of stress as it's a very, very recent move. I am a large-bodied person that wears glasses on occasion. I have a sort of swath of curly blonde hair that kind of hangs near my right ear. I have deep brown doe-like eyes and a dimple. Gosh, now I can't remember where it is. My left cheek. And in terms of access needs, I may go off camera at different points. My access needs are met by the captions and by the slowing of people's speech. I often use the transcript versus captions, which may appear as me putting glasses on and off because the transcripts do not have the ability to adjust the sizing, and that presents a barrier in terms of the size that it's offered at. What else is there? Let's see. I'm lost in my own description, so I may just pass it on and something may occur to me and I may pop back and share it later. And that is also part of my access needs, to give myself permission to be okay with that. and to interrupt when needed. Check.
Raven here. I think I'm the last one to bully. Self-deprecation comes naturally though, so I'll go ahead with that. I am coming to you from my very messy apartment, which matches my beautiful messy appearance. I'm a solo and co-Salish two-spirit trickster. I come from Sgsmåhamel and Seixelt, as well as Tsleil-Waututh, which are out near Hope and then on the coast. I am the granddaughter and niece / nibbling / nephew of many a loved one and residential school survivors, and a few who have not survived what they have been through. As a result of that, I and a lot of my family have health problems that stem from the medical testing that has not really been ousted when it comes to addressing the residential school treatment of Indigenous peoples. And thus I, like many other Indigenous people and minorities, suffer from what I jokingly call the half-life. For my own access needs, I have been helping some family through houselessness and dealing with domestic abuse. So I'm a little bit frazzled the past couple of days. I'm also going to be going on a wonderful trip to Toronto. So those jitters are all mixed up in today. I'm going to be drawing to kind of help ease my own anxiety while I listen, but I'm that's part of my access needs, as I am also ADHD, and it helps to have more than one thing going on as I listen. Otherwise, I get very bored and very tired. I'm coming to you from Coquitlam, which is where I've settled over the past more than a decade now. And I'm very excited about this panel. I also, yeah, part of the ADHD thing is forgetting things. So I also will interrupt. In my visual description, I'm very hot. I have wonderful caramel skin. I have purple themed makeup and beautiful purple eyebrows and eyeshadow. Lavender hair, stylish lavender headphones, a Mario themed teal dress, very large boobs that are just slightly out of frame to be teasing, and an opalescent chain necklace. If you can see into the background, there's some white fluff in a cat house that is a very, very cute kitten. And then some art, a mushroom that I made in the background, as well as some glitter. And that's my chicken.
This is Q. Raven, you didn't bully me. I'm distraught.
Raven here, that comes later. Don't worry, don't worry.
Thank goodness. Yes, I am Q. I use they or it pronouns. I typically prefer it, especially from cisgender people and people who don't experience degendering for other reasons. That said, they is also perfectly acceptable and comfortable for me. I am in so-called Tsleil-Waututh. It is the land of the Sďwxʒk and Palaalt tribes of the Stolo Nation. I am a white settler, descendant of colonizers here. And I have slowly been finding a relationship to this area after moving here from so-called Vancouver, which is where I lived the longest. It wasn't very long, but it was the longest place that I've ever lived. My access needs are currently met with the captions in particular, and also the slowing down. I have a habit of talking fast when I'm anxious, so slowing down is actually really calming for me. It's very nice. I may turn off my camera if I need to stretch. I may not turn off my camera and still stretch, but I have water and snacks beside me. I also have my small cat beside me, and you may hear her when my microphone is on. She is a very chatty cat, especially when I'm speaking. She thinks that we're having a whole conversation, just the two of us. So you may hear her in the background. You may also see her because, like most cats, she does not have any idea about camera etiquette. A brief visual description. I am a white mid-20s queer person. It's the best way to describe my gender, is queer. I am very tattooed, including on my face with a small text tattoo that says "Make Bad Art." I have short, curly, dirty blonde hair, and I'm wearing a black toque over it. It is my anti-poof measure because my hair gets so big otherwise. I'm wearing a knit vest and a black tank top that says "Harm Reduction Saves Lives." And I'm also wearing comfy black waffle sweatpants. And behind me, you can see a whole wall of zines, and it's not even half the zines that my household has, but it sure does take up a large part of our wall. Yeah, that's me. Check.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for those beautiful descriptions. Yeah, so before we get in conversation, I'd like to provide just a little context on what we mean when we say cultural accessibility. I think my panelist friends here will help me do this, but I think it's important to distinguish cultural accessibility from the more compliance level measures for accessibility that people might be familiar with. Things like translation services, like ASL and Braille, or the measurements needed to make an accessible space. Cultural accessibility is very different than accessibility by way of legal compliance. It is our working definition for an expansive model for accessibility, a framework that makes room for a consideration of the social, cultural, and political conditions that determine whether the most impacted among us, especially the queer, BIPOC members of our movement, can have agency and decision-making power and the ability to participate in public life on their own terms. From the time that we banded together as a disability community, there has been a mobilization that has been dedicated to developing the resources that we wouldn't otherwise have. This is the crucial mutual aid that has allowed disability culture to thrive under a regime of cultural ableism. I like to think about ideas like cultural accessibility in a lineage of activism by disabled ancestors. I think it is one of the ways that we can preserve the identities, realities, and embodiments and learning styles of disability culture. It's one of the ways that we can speak back to and challenge the restrictive and prescriptive kind of frameworks for accessibility that were handed to us by a non-disabled culture. So that's just a little taste, and I think I'd like to dig in a little bit deeper by sharing a piece of audio with you. It's a short excerpt of a piece by my friends at the Curiosity Paradox in Portland, Oregon. They released this piece earlier in the year, and it's called Question Access. And I think it gives you, it's a nice introduction to the ways that we're going to be interrogating the topic of accessibility today, and it will take us to our discussion, which will center around questions that I posed to panelists. So this is Question Access.
It's Amanda speaking here, Carmen. I'll just be 1 second to get it queued up. Thank you.
Raven speaking. In this moment of silence, I'll just say land back.
Access. Standard Access Against Access Art by the Curiosity Paradox. Published February 18th, 2022. Revision 2.0, July 12th, 2022. Water trickling throughout. Access art describes the ways marginalized people and communities creatively grow resources, design accessibility, celebrate joy and resistance, outmaneuver supremacy culture, and dream worlds beyond the impossible. In the process of defining access art, we have placed it against what we refer to as standard access. By placing these two ideas side by side, the resistance between them further defines the other. This is a conversation starter to provoke discussion and learning. We invite you to contact us at work@thecuriosityparadox.com if you would like to discuss. Who leads? Standard Access, Eugenic Legacy, is led by code enforcers, non-disabled experts, underpaid staff, and workers without training. It is made by those who are not impacted by the access they are creating and lack lived experience of disability. Access art is led by activists, artists, poets, dancers, dreamers, institutional changemakers, consultants, and engineers who are marginalized. It is made by and with the leadership of those who directly benefit from the access that is created. What future is being dreamed? Standard Access, Eugenic Legacy, dreams of futures where disability no longer exists in public spaces or is sidelined, hidden. Access art dreams futures where the presence of disabled and marginalized people are core to the aesthetic of a beautiful, thriving public life. How are people treated? Standard Access, Eugenic Legacy, makes disabled people better workers and consumers. Access art respects disabled and marginalized people as experts in lived experience. What is the aesthetic? Standard Access, Eugenic Legacy, defines quote-unquote neutral and quote-unquote normal for those in power. It strives towards an aesthetic where accessibility is unintrusive or hidden from people whose needs are already met. Access art has a specific flair that emerges based on who is present. It opens multiple ways of naming, defining, interpreting, translating, and creating across space and time. Features like captions, audio description, gender-neutral bathrooms, language translation, financial support, ramps, accessible paths, as well as imaginative and unique forms are proactively, aesthetically prioritized. How does it feel? Standard Access, Eugenic Legacy, is implemented to avoid lawsuits and financial ruin. It is felt as an unappealing, burdensome barrier to quote-unquote real art, business, and culture. Access art involves cultural spaces with robust variation. Process, comfort, and play are prioritized. It is felt as a beautiful relief to draining ways of doing things. What is prioritized? Standard access, eugenic legacy, is tacked on at the end, after the fact. No time to learn. Maintains urgency. Implemented as workers run on empty. Standard access prioritizes the pace of institutions and bureaucracy over people. Access art is imagined before, during, and after the fact. Learning comes from repetition and change. Carefully planned and simultaneously spontaneous. Time and capacity are respected and honored sustainably. Access art compensates and resources those involved.
Thank you, Amanda. And yes, so this marks our transition into discussion. I just wanted to play that as sort of like, a way to introduce audience and everybody here to like more of a critical analysis of accessibility that makes room for the intersections of experience and context as well. I've developed a few prompts for discussion here, suited to each participant on the panel. And so I'm just going to have Elisa actually come on right now and read and help me read the questions that I drafted for this part of the event. And I think if it's okay, can I check in? Cio, is it okay to start with you responding?
I would prefer not to go first, Carmen.
Okay.
Thank you for asking.
Okay. Other folks in the crew, is there some that would like to respond first?
This is Kay. I have a written response, and it dovetails the audio quite well. So if everyone's comfortable, I'm happy to go first. Check.
Thanks. Carmen speaking. Thank you, Kay. That would be awesome. And maybe I'll just stick with my format of having Elisa read the prompts, if that's okay. Check.
Elisa speaking. Hi, everyone. Just before we move on, if I can just do a quick access check. I'm sorry if we forgot to make a note of this earlier. If we could, so I just want to make an access check in regards to the chat. If folks could kind of limit interaction on the chat for now, because we do not want to overwhelm anybody using a reader for the chat. If we have messages coming in the chat at the same time that we are speaking, it might kind of get a little too overwhelming. So we will make some time during the break if folks want to make comments or hype our wonderful panelists and moderator up in the chat. That it's not necessarily a question for the Q&A. We will certainly make time for that during the break. But for now, if we could actually just use the chat to communicate with our active listener and accessibility assistant, Divya. I'm actually going to let Divya type something in the chat just to quickly say, hello, this is Divya. Please reach out to me if you have questions. So I'll just let Divya do that quickly right now. Awesome. Thank you, Divya. So again, just to repeat, Divya is here to assist with any accessibility requests and to help mediate between the organizers and our tech, Amanda. So please kindly just use the chat for now to directly message Divya. And with that, I will have my question for Kay. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. So Kay, Carmen has known, I have to kind of go from Carmen's first person here. Carmen has known you for many years as someone who takes the lead of community when creating accessible space. Carmen is wondering if you could share your perspective on the concept of universal accessibility and fixed compliance level accessibility policy, which many institutions consider to be best practices within the field. Can you share your knowledge and experience in the area of culturally specific accessibility practices, touching on your work with Queer ASL, Gallery Gachet, and with youth as part of Art Starts in schools? End of question. Check.
This is Kay. I believe those were two questions, so I'm going to answer the first one, specific about best practices and universal access. Reading. What is my perspective on universal access and base level compliance? I am nodding performatively, as if I wasn't about to read what I have been considering all day, but also with a big grin on my face as I launch into sharing something I'm very passionate about. Thank you for asking me something, Carmen, that I am genuinely keen to share. Today, I'll start with a metaphor. Base level compliance, or striving for, quote, universal access, unquote, with finger gestures, is to me like an alphabet. It's a common starting point that institutions and standardized education can bundle up and deliver. We teach it early on, and it's fundamental for other things like reading, writing, and communication. It's essential. However, to keep that metaphor going, I don't believe that anyone thinks that they know a language if they have only learned the alphabet, planned sarcastic chuckle, except if it's a signed language alphabet, dramatic eye roll. It's a foundation. And once we start building on that, we learn about words and grammar, and that there are rules that contradict each other, and that there are regional and cultural variations and deep histories behind those. And if we keep going, that this knowledge also distances us from each other, depending on what works for us, for our communities, or the majority language or group in power. That in learning the, quote, right way, we then develop the need to protect and defend against any deviation, to correct others who do not follow the way we learned, and to stigmatize what is to us non-standard or incorrect. If I have lost anyone here, let's uncouple this from the metaphor. What I am ultimately saying is that universal access is a goal on paper, but it is an ultimately unattainable goal because to define something as universal is just another way of homogenizing everyone into an easily categorized and standardized package. There is no one single way for everyone to access everything because there is no one distillable way of being human. Keep in mind that these systems and policies of compliance are about efficiency and about not getting in trouble. It's the agreed upon way of doing things as dictated by people who are looking at law and monetary gain. We make standards so that A, the people who make the rules don't get in trouble, and B, the people whose primary goal is to make money can by spending less on unnecessary or extra things. This is why it's a starting point, and it's not something to be proud of. Just as you wouldn't get excited or advertise that your facility now has walls. It's an assumed baseline. And because I personally believe that accessibility work is about dismantling assumptions and creatively assessing all of the available parts to see what is possible and name what is impossible in simple and transparent ways, it's the least exciting part of the work. Sadly, it's also the place where most institutions stop because it's tangible. It's easy to write a press release about the facility upgrades you have done, but harder to delight in the possibility and potential PR risks in inviting bodies who may struggle and will loudly demand for more than you are prepared to give. I like to remind people that universal access is a myth, because you'll always have conflicting access needs. But for people who regularly practice accessibility and who are really driven by creative challenge, it's an unattainable goal worth reaching for and seeing how close you can get. I work within the arts, and one of the things I hope we are constantly doing is challenging and critiquing, not just the work we put on display, but our own systems, our people, the people we hire, our own art practices, the buildings and venues where we do our work, often and always on stolen and occupied ancestral Indigenous land, the water we have access to from our taps, or the washroom where you never have to think about anything beyond doing your business. And I really want to stress this here, especially to anyone who feels like they have a defined audience or existing and healthy customer base. Critique that demographic that you're so worried about offending or inconveniencing by prioritizing bodies who have not been included or welcomed or paid to participate. What did you do to attract them? And if you're working really hard to retain them, ask why. Are they really the low-hanging fruit you think they are? Why are they not included in your definition of universal if universal access is still your goal? And if you're worried about losing them, why don't you say so? It's impossible to be everything to everyone, and I see so many people pretending like they are, which is why using a checklist is so comforting. It's a scapegoat of sorts. It's easy to explain change when it comes from something or someone else. But by that, I mean simply that it's easier for an institution to inconvenience non-disabled bodies with a policy or law-based decision than to say, we are doing this because this washroom or these stairs or this extremely famous and internationally touring exhibition is extremely inaccessible, and we have decided to take a pause to do something about this. I guess to summarize my perspective on compliance is to say, do it because it's easy, and then start learning how to read and write, and then get into conversation with other people and argue and learn and relearn, because now you can, because you learned the alphabet and you have a common vocabulary or place to start from, but then grow up. Thank you. Check.
Thank you so much, Kay. I just want to do like a really quick time-based access check. So we had a 5-minute break scheduled for now. I'm wondering, should we do, and maybe I'm deferring to my panelists here, should we do one more response to a question before break, or should we have a break now?
Raven here, I vote break now.
Okay. Okay, first to the mic gets it, I think. So yeah, let's take our 5-minute break now. Can I just have someone say like what time, Pacific time and Eastern time we will be coming back then?
Siobhan speaking. It's 7:54, so I would suggest we return at 8 just to make it simple.
Okay, cool. 8, and then, oh, it's really late over in the other parts, so 8 or 11, I guess. Okay, we'll see you soon. Yeah, Carmen, check. Hi there. It's Carmen speaking. It's 8 o'clock where I am, so I started talking again. So this second half was supposed to be all Q&A, but I really want us to prioritize responses to our from our panelists. So we might have a shorter Q&A period than we had thought, but I think this will be a great way to spend our time. So do I have a volunteer for next response?
Q here. I am happy to go next.
Thank you, Q. Awesome. And Elisa, do you have that question ready?
Elisa here. Yep, I've got Q's question ready.
Awesome. Thank you
can hear me.
for supporting.
Okay, no worries. Oh, and just a reminder to folks to again minimize chats to unless there's a direct message or question to Divya. Thank you. Okay, so Q. We would like to ask you about local histories of cultural ableism and how the movement against Bill C-7, the Medical Assistance in Dying Act, works to preserve disability culture. Could you describe the value of disability culture for those who embody the majority experience within the disability community, which is that of being in poverty and at the whim of harmful public health policy? Building off of that question, why do you think harm reduction and anti-poverty organizing and providing space for our communities to grieve are important dimensions of cultural accessibility? Check.
Thank you, both Carm and Alyssa, for these questions. I wrote myself some notes, nothing quite so eloquent as Kay's, but I feel we're on the same page with access needs in that regard. I am mindful of the time, and so I really want to speak to Bill C-7 and that local history. And I think I am quite able to build in some thoughts about harm reduction, anti-poverty and class analysis, and the experience of disabled people in these spaces into anything I have to say about Bill C-7 organizing. So specifically about Bill C-7, I will note for anyone that is not aware, Bill C-7 is an expansion on Bill C-14. C-14 made medical assistance in dying is the legal term for it. I prefer to call it physician-assisted suicide or euthanasia. C-14 made that legal. C-7 has been working to expand it to be eligible to people who are not currently dying, who don't have a reasonable expectation of death in the quote-unquote near future, and specifically to people who are interpreted as experiencing, what is the language they use? Grievous and like interminable pain or suffering, I think is the legal language that they use. Essentially disabled people. In order to qualify, you must be disabled and documented as such. There has been a concerted and ongoing effort by people in so-called Canada against this. I want to specifically name Gabrielle Peters as a really strong voice, and she worked closely with Catherine Frazee, who is over on the East Coast, and the Disability Justice Network of Ontario, and specifically Sarah Jama, have also been heavily involved in fighting this expansion. This is obviously a really heavy topic, so I really invite people to take care of themselves as you need to. And I also invite you to engage in this topic right now, because this is a place where it is understood in a complex way. It's understood why there might be factors for people that would make them interested in accessing this kind of service, or systemic resource, we might call it, in all of its complexity. And we can also understand systemic coercion and oppression to be contributing factors in people accessing euthanasia. C7 and the fight against C7 is very important to disability culture, and is really, the fight against it specifically is very important for preserving it, because the fight against C7 is about preserving disabled life. It's about preserving the complexity of an innate human experience. That is the simplest way to put it, I think. it's also, as much as it is a local fight, people in so-called Vancouver, so-called BC, across so-called Canada have been fighting this specific instance of eugenics. It's also a global fight. And I think that I'm aware that people in so-called Australia, in the UK, in the so-called United States, in Aotearoa, also known as New Zealand, are all currently fighting similar introductions and similar expansions. And yeah, as I said, it's the fight against it is about saving disabled lives, is about recognizing the inherent humanity of disabled people as part of the public sphere. And it's also about celebrating and reveling in our joy and our resistance. Specific actions I've been involved in against C7 in this pandemic era have been something called the disability filibuster, which has happened for 2 years now, where people have come together online in virtual spaces, whether it's hosted Zooms or Twitter is a really big space for this kind of conversation and these facilitated discussions. Disabled people have come together and made art together and discussed class and feminism and racial oppression and colonialism. And all together, we've been rejecting the idea that it's better to be dead than disabled. And I think that the more people spend time with disabled people, and the more disabled people specifically spend time with disabled people, the more we're able to reject that kind of framing that if I experience X symptom, then I'll want to die. If I experience Y, then I'll want to die. It's rejecting this idea of independence and instead embracing interdependence, which I think is a huge, important part of disability culture. I do also want to note that some disability culture is not like that. Disability rights has done amazing and beautiful work, and it has also been single issue focused. It has been predominantly white, predominantly male, upper class, cisgender, heterosexual, colonial, and relies on legal frameworks a lot of the time. Disability justice also, obviously, you know, it's a moving, growing framework. And I understand criticisms of sometimes a lack of class analysis in DJ specifically. But what I find beautiful about disability justice is that it understands that it will have shortcomings, and it grows into them. It grows into expanding its ideas, and it grows into further recognitions of humanity, essentially. I'm just going to quickly tie this into harm reduction specifically, and also grief. Like disability, grief is an inherent human experience. In Western colonial constructs, we are often repressed in our grief. We are often not allowed to experience the fullness of it through capitalism, through a removal of our ancestral teachings. And yeah, through colonial violence, we are separated from our grief. And I find that I am most able to feel the fullness of my grief and hold people in their grief in disability spaces, whether it's grief through death or grief through changing abilities, grief through life changes in general. And I think that the disability cultures that I am part of and witness to embrace those experiences. Harm reduction is, in my opinion, a radical practice of grief and love. You might be able to hear my cat right now. She's yelling. But harm reduction specifically in its radical roots is about keeping each other alive and recognizing that specifically drug users, and to extend that, all of us, because most of us use drugs in some way or another. It's just that a lot of our drugs are legalized and regulated, so it's safe. But drug users, especially illicit drug users, took the grief that they were experiencing in their communities, in our communities. I speak as a drug user and a harm reductionist. We took the grief that's in our communities and we said that it's better to use drugs than to die. And that is the choice for a lot of people. And built practices of care around that. Built practices of needle exchanges and distributions, drug testing, smaller, safer supply avenues. And to me, all of these things are disability culture. Often drug users will be left out of disability spaces because they are not desirable, because we are not the people that are the role models in, quote unquote, good society. And I think that that really needs to be disrupted, because who better to lead through pandemics and through societal collapse than especially Black and Brown people who have already experienced multiple apocalypses, who have already experienced kind of the worst things you can. So yeah, all of these things are disability culture, and disability culture, in my opinion, is very much embracing the fullness of the possibilities of humanity. And of course we want to preserve that. Why wouldn't we? Check.
Siobhan speaking. I put my hand up because I wanted to piggyback on something that you were saying, Hugh, but I'll just have to riff on my own now. Hold on, I'm going to do the lower hand thing. There we go. I'm going to try and go back to the ancestral healing was mentioned, and healing justice most recently was mentioned. And both of those pieces tie into some of what was intended to be asked in, I guess, a question directed towards me, which touches on how anti-Black racism shows up in inside of and around, in basically in all elements of society, really. And I found myself sort of looking at the question that has not yet been voiced, but I will give it a chance to be read into the room, and thinking, oh, great, I'm tasked with explaining anti-Black racism and solving it in one question. Was my thought. Okay, how much time do we have? Now in our last sort of 15 minutes together, I can confidently say neither of those things will happen in any kind of fullness, but I do work through consultancy, so folks can reach out for paid consultations beyond our time together. One piece that comes to mind when I think about anti-Black racism and how it positions itself is something that the author Ibram X. Kendi said around racism and positioning oneself as I'm not a racist is not sufficient. One has to be actively anti-racist. that to simply state that one is not racist is not enough. And with anti-Blackness, it follows along those same lines. We are all swimming in the same colonial soup. We have internalized and been taught to internalize anti-Blackness. And so the only way to actively not be engaging in anti-Blackness is to actively work at countering it. One can't assume that you're just not being anti-Black. You are being anti-Black until you are actively not. And so I think about the good work done at the Disability Filibuster. And I think about the historical nature of the term filibuster, which is sort of sidelined or not explored in the larger context of collective liberation. The history with the term filibuster is that it has deep colonial and anti-Black roots. It was filibusters that were used throughout the 19th century to support and protect white interests at the expense of upholding anti-lynching laws being passed, poll taxes, discrimination in employment. Filibusters were used historically to discriminate, to actively and legally discriminate. So the notion of a disability filibuster is deeply problematic if one knows the history of that term. It's literally, you know, as Audre Lorde says, trying to abolish. Oh no, I'm going to mess up the quote. One can't use the master's tools to bring down the master's house. And using the term filibuster is problematic in that way. When I think about healing justice and the intentionality of healing justice as a framework to look at systems of oppression, systems generational trauma, generational systems of violence that are being countered by looking to ancestral healing practices and building on those ancestral practices to bring greater, and one can again use the term harm reduction into Black, Brown, Indigenous bodies, spirits, and lives. And these are terms that I would invite you to look into more fully, again, in such a brief period of time with one more speaker yet to speak. You know, these are not things that we're going to be able to crack open with any degree of effectiveness right now. But I hope if there is something to take from what I have shared, it's the piece around you are engaged in anti-Blackness unless you are actively working against it. And to really look at the historical context inside of how things are built, that it's not okay to just sidestep the history and assume that either it's not known or that it won't be problematic or that it will be overlooked because of the good work that's being done. That is happening time and again at the expense of Black, Brown, and Indigenous bodies. And we all, at least in terms of this panel, know the history around disability justice work and who were at the forefront of establishing these practices. The same can be said with healing justice, with Cara Page and the Southern, I want to say Southern Healing Collective, but I may be misquoting the name of the organization that contributed there. That these came out of a need and a engagement with community to see what would work to bring the healing back into community. And that's foundational. That's really foundational. That is the nothing about us without us, you know, moniker that gets put forward. And perhaps just before ending, I'll let my question be read so you can see how brilliantly I answered what few things applied. Thanks so much. Check.
Thank you, Siobhan. And yes, let's read that question. And definitely, I really appreciate your response. And yeah, question my limited framing of the question. But thank you. And Elisa, if we can read that question. And
Sure. Lisa speaking. I think that Siobhan did answer the heart of, I think, what Carmen was thoughtfully trying to ask, but in case there's some room to answer any other things, I'll read it out. So Siobhan, we have learned from you that in the work of disability justice and the arts that we must be explicit when it comes to responding to anti-Black racism in our work and the platforms we hold. I'm wondering if you could share how a practice of accessibility can meaningfully respond to traditions of anti-Black racism within the cultural sector and the wider disability community. Can you speak to your work of community care with Hogan's Alley and Vines, and how the concept of harvesting ancestral teachings as described in your piece for this year's Revolver Festival relates to the work of disability justice and healing justice? So I'm guessing maybe a part of the question Sho can address is, that the project that Carmen described in his question.
Yeah, I mean, it's ancestral teachings. The project is a hybrid of live and virtual, so that it can address broader reach in terms of accessibility. It is a project that hopefully will have other iterations in future. It is one that very much touches on the notion of ancestral healing practices, this in particular linked to cultural foodways. I don't want to go too deep into it because I don't want to truncate Raven's time any more than is the case. But again, contact me directly beyond this and again, the emphasis on contract, which is an important piece with Black, brown, racialized bodies. It's not a call to simply extract. It does need to be recognized as the paid work that it is. So with that container, I shall pass it along graciously to my dear friend Raven.
thank you so much, Sio. And Raven, would you like your question read out before you respond, or would you just like to launch right in?
I'd love for it to be read, please.
Okay.
Elisa speaking. No worries. Okay, so Raven, we want to ask you what cultural accessibility means to you as a disabled two-spirit trickster, as you sometimes describe yourself. You often say that you and artists like you are limited to extractive, depleting, survival-based arts labor due to the prevalence of colonization and gender-based violence in the cultural sector. Can you describe the conditions of a space where you and the communities you are part of can thrive without harm or the expectation that you would have to accept compromises in order to participate? In other words, what is your vision for a safe and affirming, culturally accessible space given your positionality? Check.
Thank you. And Raven, I'm just gonna cede the rest of the time today to you. I think we need to take up some space, and I'm going to check in with access workers, et cetera, after you respond. And you know, I understand we're hitting a time edge right now, but let's just let's give feel free to go off. Sorry. Check.
I would say that we need to have community and cultural activities that are existing outside of a capitalist framework. A lot of the discrimination that we experience, the disability community, minority communities, Indigenous communities, is at the hands of people who have the bottom line in mind in every point of the interaction. And a lot of disabled folks put up with way too much, are made to feel as if they are putting out their facilitators, their presenters, their communities by simply requesting the access needs that they require, or even the access needs that they know are required of their audience. Simply having a, simply having a living wage for those involved within the projects is one way to kind of remove at least one of those barriers. I talked a little bit earlier about the kind of joking half-life that a lot of Indigenous people face. A lot of people from my generation and even previous generations talk about how we didn't think that we would live as long as we have. I personally have never conceived that I would have any of the successes that I have had today, and I'm still low lower class. I'm not even close to being middle class. And that's also just very sad. And I feel like having spaces where we also address those inequalities is also very important. The places that I've worked, I make every effort to make it as accessible to the communities that I'm a part of for those spaces. But that's often just my free labor for those spaces. And a lot of the communities that I'm a part of, minority groups, Indigenous, Fat, disabled, queer, we're often doing all this work for free. We're doing consultation work for free. It's part of why we're hired, but it's never a part of the fees that are a part of that contract. And just creating and hosting cultural events, community events, without a monetary goal, really, I think is one of the main ways that we can help build community. Formerly, community was a church space, gag, and other communities or other cities. Some of these communities are built through bar culture as well, and the arts is part of the main reason Vancouver is what it is today. We are a leisure city, and thus we have more artistic representation, but it's still to get more tourists, and the audience is often not including our disabled folks, our marginalized folks, our Indigenous folks. The only reason that I've been involved in a lot of the performance and theater community has been because I got a hospitality job within those sectors. And thus I had often free tickets to those events. And even now I still rarely get to attend because I am on that grind of trying to squeeze a rental lifestyle out of one mundane job and multiple contracts where I'm overworking a disabled body. And it's quite unsustainable, and we need to do better. Check.
Thank you so much, Reagan. So I just want to check, like, do we have like time for 5 minutes more to take at least one question? Maybe I just am putting this question out to the access workers maybe first, just because I know there's some strict time limits on their presence. someone
It's
could.
Siobhan speaking, Carmen. Hi, I appreciate your wanting to include questions. I fear that 5 minutes would not be enough for the type of depth of questions and responses. So perhaps we could find a way to welcome questions in other formats, written, maybe video, maybe audio, that could come to you at another time, and if appropriate, extend to us under some further extension of our arrangement. But I do appreciate the reason behind wanting to offer it.
Thank you, Siobhan. I appreciate. Sorry. I appreciate you offering that option. I think that's a wonderful way to extend this space into another time and space, and I think that's really great. We could have a few more of these discussions, I think, and still not address the topic, meaning with as much depth as it needs. So yes, perhaps we'll leave it here and maybe just invite folks to, in our closing, to send appreciations for our panelists today in the chat if they would like. And yes, please follow up with some questions by getting in touch with the organizers. We can take those questions and find some way to respond. But it's been very nice to share space with you today. And as always, it feels like we ran out of time right when we were scratching the surface. Yeah, lots of love to you all, and hope you have a good rest of your night.
Vivian here. I just want to say, like 2 seconds, like I'm blown away by the depth and breadth and honesty and potency of everybody's ideas, and I'm very moved. And I know that the cultural sector is called the creative industry, and yet I think we've demonstrated such a total lack of imagination engaging with the disability culture. So I know that in some ways, like, you're demanding us to creatively challenge a status quo, and Kate, like, I love that metaphor of the language learning to help explain the kind of the richness of engaging with disability culture. It's super helpful. And I'd say, like, learning a new language, you need to be motivated, of course, but you need wonderful, like, really great teachers. And I know that all 5 of you have been really good teachers tonight. So thank you so much. And I'll just say that there is a survey that will be sent to participants. So if you could fill out the survey, we really appreciate. So thank you very much.
Elisa speaking. Thank you, Vivian. And to the point, if folks have, I'm so sorry we couldn't get to the Q&A today, and much appreciation to Carmen for keeping us within time today, the time promised. If folks want to include their questions into the survey, I believe we might have a spot for open feedback in there, or we didn't anticipate this. So if there should be spots in the survey where you can creatively put in your questions. It would be great to do a follow-up conversation now that we've started the conversation. So we'd be very much interested at the MOV to program something again with our panelists and Carmen today to follow up on the questions. And yeah, sorry, rambling on there, but basically, please send us your questions, and please thank you for the comments in the chat. We look forward to continuing to engage with your questions. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.